My paranoid dad blowtorched my acceptance letter saying AI can't do trade work yet. The smell of burning plastic and toasted cardstock was the first thing that hit me when I walked into the garage. It wasn't just a smell. It was the physical scent of my entire future being reduced to a pile of black, curling ash on the concrete floor. My dad, Emmett, was standing over the remains with a blue flame plumbing torch in his hand, his face illuminated by a sickly orange glow. He didn't even look up when the door slammed. He just clicked the igniter off and watched the last corner of the letter, the part with the university's gold seal, shrivel into nothing. I stood there, frozen, my backpack still heavy on my shoulders. I worked for 2 years to get into that electrical engineering and apprenticeship program. 2 years of straight A's and 3 separate internships just to prove a girl could hack it in high-voltage industrial systems. Dad? My voice came out as a pathetic, thin whisper. What are you doing? Emmett finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had that sharp, terrifying focus he gets when he has been reading those fringe forms for 12 hours straight. He wasn't even angry. He looked at me with this twisted, heartbreaking pity. I am saving you, Justine, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. They lied to you. This program, it is a data mining operation. They aren't teaching you how to wire a grid. They are using your inputs to train the next generation of autonomous maintenance bots. You would be the last human they ever need, and then they would discard you the second the algorithm masters your physical movements. I stepped toward the pile of ash, my vision blurring with hot, stinging tears. It was a full-ride scholarship, Dad. It was the only way I was getting out of this town. You aren't leaving to become a battery for a machine, he snapped, pointing the torch at the workbench. Look at this copper. Look at these manual pipe cutters. This is the only thing that is real. AI can't crawl through a flooded basement and feel a leak with its bare hands. It can't troubleshoot a short circuit in a house built in 1924 by the smell of the wires. He stepped closer, his shadow looming over me. I talked to the clinic, Justine. I know what they are trying to do with the new digital certifications. They want to track your biometric data while you work. I won't have it. You are staying here. We are going back to basics. Pure analog. I looked past him to the kitchen door where my mom, Abby, was standing. She was clutching a dish towel so hard her knuckles were white, her eyes darting between us. She didn't say a word. She just turned the light off and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. Go to your room, Emmett said, turning back to his workbench. And give me your phone. The recruiters are already pinging your location. I didn't move. I realized in that moment that my house wasn't a home anymore. It was a bunker, and I was the only prisoner. I handed Emmett my phone because I knew the alternative was him taking it by force, and I wasn't ready to see that version of my father yet. I watched him drop it into a lead-lined lockbox he had bolted to the garage studding. He called it a Faraday cage, but to me, it was just a coffin for the only connection I had to a world that made sense. I walked up to my room in total silence, the floorboards creaking under my feet like they were groaning for me. I laid on my bed staring at the ceiling for 4 hours. My brain was looping the sound of that blowtorch clicking on. It is called the Zeigarnik effect. The brain hates an unfinished task, and my entire life was currently a task that had been set on fire before it could even start. I was supposed to be at the orientation mixer in 3 weeks. Instead, I was trapped in a house that felt like it was shrinking. At 6 in the morning, the door to my room flew open. It didn't just open. It hit the stopper with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Emmett was standing there in his work khakis, holding a pair of heavy-duty leather gloves and a vintage rust-spotted toolbox. Get up, he said. No good morning. No, I am sorry I burned your dreams. Just a command. The grid is going down, Justine. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the dependency they are building into your generation is the kill switch. If you can't fix a circuit without a tablet telling you which wire to clip, you are already dead. We start today. I followed him downstairs. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast in desperation. My mom, Abby, was standing by the sink, staring out the window at the neighbor's yard. Mr. Wagner was out there, probably checking his smart irrigation system, a man who lived in the future while my father was dragging us back to the Stone Age. Abby, give her the tea, Emmett said, gesturing to a mug on the table. Mom didn't look at me. She just pushed a mug of bitter, herbal-smelling liquid toward me. It is for the inflammation, she whispered. Your father thinks the Wi-Fi signals in the neighborhood are causing cellular stress. I looked at her, searching for a spark of rebellion, but she was gone. She was a shell. He hadn't just blowtorched my letter. He had been slow-burning her for years. Drink it and get to the garage, Emmett ordered. The next 8 hours were a psychological war zone. He didn't just teach me how to strip wire. He lectured me on the digital deception. He had me using manual hand drills from the 1950s, tools that made my shoulders scream and my palms blister within an hour. Every time I reached for a modern convenience, even a simple LED flashlight, he would snatch it away and replace it with a kerosene lantern. Feel the resistance, he would mutter, leaning over my shoulder until I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. The machine wants to smooth everything out. It wants to make it easy so you stop thinking. When you stop thinking, they own your labor. If it doesn't hurt, you aren't learning. By noon, my hands were shaking. I was trying to wire a manual copper terminal, but the blisters were popping, making the metal slick and hard to grip. "I can't do this, Dad," I said, dropping the pliers. "My hands are raw. This isn't engineering. It is penance." Emmett grabbed my wrist. His grip wasn't painful, but it was unyielding. He turned my palm up, looking at the red, weeping skin. "This is the first time you have actually touched the trade, Justine. You want to be an electrician? This is the cost. You think a bot feels this? You think the people who wrote the code for your apprenticeship care about your hands? They want you to be a sensor. I want you to be a master." He let go and walked to a heavy steel cabinet. He pulled out a roll of copper that looked older than I was. "This is pre-war stock. Pure. No digital tracking markers embedded in the alloy. We are going to rewire the entire garage on an isolated loop. No smart meters, no reporting back to the utility company. We are going dark." "And then what?" I shouted, the frustration finally boiling over. "We live in the dark while the rest of the world moves on?" "Luca is going to school. Mr. Wagner is getting his roof replaced with solar shingles. Everyone is moving forward, and you are digging a hole." Emmett's face darkened. The calm was gone. He slammed his hand against the workbench, making the tools jump. "Mr. Wagner is a fool. When the surge comes, and it will come, his smart shingles will fry his brain while he is sleeping. And Luca? That boy is a consumer. He is a parasite living on the back of a dying system. You stay away from him. He carries a tracking device in his pocket every second of the day. He is a beacon for everything I am trying to keep out of this house." He stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a low, vibrating growl. "I saw him, Justine. I saw him hovering by the fence last night. If I see him talking to you, if I see you trying to use his devices to bypass the security I have built for this family, I will consider it a breach of contract. Do you understand me?" "Contract?" I whispered. "What contract? I am your daughter, not an employee." "You are a Frederick," he said, like it was a title of nobility. "And in this house, we value the autonomy of the human hand. Now, pick up the drill. We have 4 more holes to bore before sundown." I picked up the drill. I had to. It is called the path of least resistance, another psychological trap. When a dominant force removes all your exits, you stop looking for a door and start looking for a way to survive the room. But as the sun started to dip below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the garage floor, I heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping on the back wall. It was coming from the alleyway, right behind the woodpile. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. It was the signal Luca and I had used since we were 10. It was a heart rate rhythm. It meant I am here. I looked at Emmett. He was hunched over a circuit breaker, his back to me, lost in his analog obsession. I slowly set the manual drill down on the sawdust. My heart was hammering against my ribs, loud enough that I was sure he could hear it over the clinking of his tools. I took one step toward the back door, then another. The adrenaline was hitting my system, sharpening my senses, making the dim light of the garage feel like a neon blur. I reached for the handle, my blistered fingers stinging as they touched the cold metal. "Justine," Emmett said without turning around. I froze. My hand stayed on the handle. "Don't forget to lock the cabinet before you go in for dinner," he said, his voice completely level. "We can't have the moisture getting to the pre-war stock." "I won't, Dad," I said, my voice barely a breath. I slipped out the door and into the cool evening air. I didn't run. Running makes noise. I drifted like a ghost toward the woodpile, my eyes scanning the darkness. "Luca?" I whispered into the shadows. A hand reached out and grabbed my arm, pulling me behind the stack of oak logs. It was Luca. He looked terrified. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something that glowed with a soft blue light. It was a burner phone. "I saw the smoke from the garage yesterday," he whispered, his eyes wide. "I knew he did it. Justine, your mom called my mom. She is scared. She said he has started boarding up the crawl space." I took the phone. The screen felt like a piece of the sun in my hand. "He is losing it, Luca. He thinks the apprenticeship is a trap. He thinks everything is a trap." "You have to get out," Luca said. "I have been talking to the recruiters. They haven't given up on you yet, but they need you to sign the digital ethics waiver by Friday, or they will give your spot to the next person on the list." "Friday?" I felt the room shrinking again. "That is 3 days away. I am locked in, Luca." He took my phone. He is watching the Wi-Fi. "Use this," he said, pressing the burner into my hand. "It is encrypted. It won't show up on his scanners. Just sign the document and we will figure out a way to get you to the station." I looked at the phone. I thought about the scholarship. I thought about the electrical engineering program. And then I thought about the way Emmett looked at my blisters with pride. I was about to hit the sign button when a beam of light cut through the darkness of the alleyway like a laser. Justine? Emmett's voice boomed from the garage door. Who are you talking to? I shoved the phone into the waistband of my jeans and turned around, my heart nearly stopping. Emmett was standing in the doorway, holding a high-powered searchlight. He didn't point it at me. He pointed it directly at the woodpile. I told you, Justine, he said, his voice dropping into that terrifying, calm vibration. I told you the parasites would come for you. He started walking toward us, the heavy thud of his boots on the gravel sounding like the ticking of a clock. Luca, run, I whispered. But before Luca could move, my dad reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device with a single red button. You think your little gadgets work out here? Emmett shouted. You think you can bring the signal into my sanctuary? He pressed the button. The burner phone in my waistband didn't just vibrate. It let out a high-pitched metallic shriek, and for a split second, I felt a jolt of static electricity jump from the screen directly into my hip. The screen flickered, turned a sickly shade of green, and then went completely black. Emmett was 10 feet away now. He held the searchlight steady on my face. Hand it over, he said, and tell your friend to go home before I show him what a real manual labor looks like. I looked at Luca, who was backing away, his hands up. I looked at Emmett, and then I looked at the black screen of the dead phone. The loop wasn't just open. It was severed. Give me the device, Justine, Emmett said, holding out his hand. Before the interference does permanent damage to your nervous system. I didn't give it to him. I did the one thing he didn't expect. I turned and ran, not toward the house, but toward Mr. Wagner's fence. Justine! Emmett roared. But I wasn't listening. I had to know if the sock was still floating. I had to know if there was any part of the world that he couldn't touch. I hit the top of the chain-link fence and felt the metal bite into my blistered palms, but the adrenaline was so thick I barely registered the pain. I rolled over the jagged top and tumbled into Mr. Wagner's yard, landing hard on a bed of manicured mulch that smelled like expensive fertilizer and order. Behind me, the fence rattled violently as Emmett slammed into it. He didn't climb. He wouldn't climb. He saw the fence as a boundary, a jurisdictional line he couldn't cross without losing the moral high ground he had built in his head. Get back over here, Justine, he roared, his voice echoing off the side of the Wagner's house. You are stepping into a slaughterhouse. That house is a node. It is a harvesting station. I didn't look back. I scrambled to my feet, my chest heaving, and ran toward the sliding glass door. The dead burner phone was a heavy, useless weight in my waistband, but I could see the soft blue glow of the Wagner's smart home hub through the window. It was a beacon. It was a lifeline. Mr. Wagner appeared in the doorway, wearing a silk robe and holding a tablet, his face a mask of total confusion. Justine? What on earth is happening? He asked, sliding the door open just a crack. Mr. Wagner, please, I gasped, practically falling into his kitchen. I need your Wi-Fi. Just for 1 minute. My dad, he is having a crisis. I have to sign my enrollment papers before the deadline. Mr. Wagner looked past me to the fence where Emmett was now pacing like a caged animal. Emmett? Is he holding a searchlight? Why is he yelling about harvesting? Don't open that door, Wagner, Emmett screamed from the darkness. She is compromised. If you let her onto your network, you are giving them a backdoor to your entire life. I am warning you, the signals in that house are already degrading your cognitive function. Mr. Wagner looked at me, then back at Emmett, and then down at his tablet. He sighed, a long, weary sound of a neighbor who had been dealing with my father's analog transition for way too long. Justine, come in. The password is the same as always. Your father needs professional help, not a plumbing torch. I collapsed onto a bar stool and pulled out the dead burner phone, but it was bricked. The jammer Emmett used must have fried the internal circuitry. I felt a surge of pure, cold panic. Mr. Wagner, can I use your iPad? Please. I just need to log into my portal and hit one button. Of course, dear, he said, handing me the device. My fingers were shaking so bad I could barely type my username. I could hear Emmett outside, but the shouting had stopped. That was worse. The silence meant he was thinking. The silence meant he was calculating. I glanced out the window and saw him walking back toward our garage, his searchlight cutting a jagged path through the night. He is going for his tools, I whispered. Justine, focus on the screen, Mr. Wagner said, leaning over my shoulder. Sign the paper. Get it done. I got the portal to load. The progress bar was moving at a crawl. 10%, 20%. I could see the document. Digital Ethics and Advanced Automation Waiver. It was the only thing standing between me and the electrical engineering program. I reached the signature line and prepared to use the stylus. Suddenly, the lights in the Wagner's kitchen flickered. A low, vibrating hum started in the walls, growing louder by the second. What is that? Mr. Wagner asked, looking up at his recessed lighting. It is him, I said, my blood turning to ice. He is not coming for me. He is coming for the power. I ran to the window. Emmett wasn't in the garage. He was at the utility pole on the edge of our property line. He was wearing his heavy-duty rubber lineman boots and carrying a long fiberglass hot stick. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was looking for the transformer. "Dad, stop!" I screamed through the glass. He didn't even blink. He hooked the fiberglass pole onto the cutout switch and yanked. There was a blinding flash of blue-white light and a bang that sounded like a transformer explosion. The entire block went pitch black. The hum in the walls died instantly. The iPad in my hand flickered and showed the no connection icon. "He cut the main line," Mr. Wagner said, his voice trembling. "He actually cut the power to the whole street." "He didn't just cut it," I said, watching the darkness. "He is isolating us." I looked back toward our house. In the sea of blackness, one single window was glowing with an eerie, flickering yellow light. It was the garage. He had switched on his backup generators, the old diesel-chugging monsters he had been tuning for months. He had the only power for 3 blocks, and he had my phone, my letter, and my mother. I heard the back door of our house open. A shadow moved across the lawn. It was Abby. She was walking toward the fence, her head down. She reached the chain link and pressed her face against the wire. "Justine?" she called out, her voice barely audible over the distant drone of the diesel generator. I ran to the fence, Mr. Wagner right behind me. "Mom, you have to help me. He is losing his mind. He just blew the transformer." Abby looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw a flicker of that pre-war stock Emmett was so obsessed with. She reached through the fence and pressed a small, cold object into my hand. It was the key to the lead-lined lockbox in the garage. "He is in the crawl space," she whispered, her eyes darting back to the glowing garage. "He is trying to disconnect the copper ground. He thinks the surge is coming tonight. You have 15 minutes before he comes back up for air." "Mom, come with me," I pleaded. "We can go to Luca's. We can call the police." "No," she said, stepping back into the shadows. "If I leave, he has nobody left to protect. He will burn the whole thing down just to make sure the ashes stay pure. You go, sign your papers, become the engineer he is afraid of." She turned and ran back toward the house before I could say another word. I looked at Mr. Wagner. "I have to get back in there. I have to get my phone." "Justine, that is dangerous," he said. "He is armed with high-voltage tools and a delusion. Let me call the sheriff on my landline." "The landline is digital, Mr. Wagner," I said, already climbing back over the fence. "He probably clipped that too. I am the only one who can talk to him. He thinks he is saving the trade. I am going to show him that the trade is moving on without him." I dropped back onto our property and stayed low, moving toward the garage. The smell of diesel fumes was overwhelming now, thick and oily in the night air. I could hear the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the generator. It sounded like a heart, a cold, mechanical heart. I reached the garage door and slipped inside. The kerosene lanterns were burning low, casting long, dancing shadows across the rows of manual tools. I saw the lead-lined box on the wall. I jammed the key into the lock and turned it. The lid popped open. My phone was sitting there, its screen dark. I grabbed it and hit the power button. 1%, 2%. The battery was almost dead from the signal jammer stress, but the screen glowed to life. I had no service. Emmett's jammer was still running somewhere in the room. I looked around the garage, my eyes landing on the circuit breaker he had been rewiring. It was a mess of copper and old-school fuses. If I could just trip the main bypass, I could kill his jammer long enough to get a signal out. "It is not in the box, Justine," a voice said from the shadows. I spun around. Emmett was standing in the entrance to the crawlspace, covered in red clay and grease. He was holding a heavy copper grounding rod like a spear. "The jammer is hardwired into the foundation now," he said, stepping into the light of the lantern. "You can trip every breaker in this room, and the silence will still hold. I told you. We are going dark. Together." He looked at the phone in my hand and shook his head. "You still don't get it. You are trying to catch a ghost. That device is a leash. Give it to me, and we can start the final lesson." I backed away, my heel catching on a coil of pre-war copper. "The lesson is over, Dad. Mom gave me the key. She wants me to go." Emmett's face went completely still. The mention of Abby was like a short circuit in his brain. "She doesn't know what she is saying. She has been conditioned by the ambient noise. I am the only one left with a clear signal." He raised the copper rod. "Give me the phone, Justine, or I will have to ground you myself." I looked at the phone. 1% battery remaining. I looked at the diesel generator chugging in the corner. And then I looked at the massive coil of copper wire at my feet. "You want to talk about analog, Dad?" I said, my voice finally steady. "Let's talk about conductivity." I grabbed the end of the copper coil and threw it, not at him. At the exposed terminals of his pure diesel generator. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the chugging of the diesel generator. Emmett stood frozen. The the heavy copper grounding rod raised like a spear, his eyes locked on the coil of wire in my hand. He knew exactly what I was about to do. He knew the physics of it better than anyone. That was the tragedy of Emmett Frederick. He wasn't stupid. He was brilliant. He was just broken. "Don't do it, Justine," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "That generator is pre-war spec. It is unshielded. If you bridge those terminals, you will create an arc flash that could blind us both. You will fry every piece of electronics within 50 feet, including that phone." "I don't need the phone to work forever, Dad," I said, my grip tightening on the copper. "I just need it to work for 3 seconds, long enough to send the signal." I didn't give him time to process the bluff. I threw the coil. It wasn't a perfect throw. The heavy copper wire unspooled in the air like a striking snake, catching the light of the kerosene lantern before slapping against the exposed terminals of the generator. The reaction was instantaneous. Crack boom. A blinding blue-white light exploded in the garage, brighter than any flashbang. The air instantly smelled like ozone and burning insulation. I squeezed my eyes shut and dove behind the workbench just as a shower of sparks rained down like molten confetti. The generator let out a dying, mechanical scream, a high-pitched whine of seizing gears, and then silence. Absolute, ringing silence. I scrambled to my feet, blinking away the spots in my vision. The garage was plunged into darkness, save for the flickering orange glow of the single kerosene lantern that had survived the blast. Smoke was pouring from the generator, filling the room with a thick, acrid haze. "My workshop!" Emmett roared from the darkness. "You foolish girl! You have compromised the entire grid." I didn't wait for him to find me. I fumbled for my phone in the dim light. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures running across the glass, but miraculously, it was still glowing. Searching for service. The jammer was dead. The generator was dead. The silence was deafening. 1 bar, LTE. I tapped the sign document button on the portal. The progress bar jumped. 50%. 75. Justine! Emmett emerged from the smoke, coughing, his face streaked with soot. He still held the grounding rod, but now he was using it like a cane, stumbling toward me. "Give me that device. You are letting the signal in. 90%. I am not letting anything in, Dad," I screamed, backing toward the garage door. "I am getting out. Submission complete." A green checkmark flashed on the screen. The confirmation email pinged. "Welcome to the Electrical Engineering Apprenticeship Program, Justine Frederick." I stared at the screen, a sob catching in my throat. I had done it. I was in. But the victory was short-lived. Emmett lunged. He didn't go for the phone. He went for the door handle. He slammed his body against the heavy steel door, locking the deadbolt with a metallic clunk. Then he turned to face me, his back against the only exit. "You signed it," he whispered, seeing the glow of the confirmation on my screen. "You actually signed it." "I had to," I said, my voice shaking. "It is my life, Dad. Not yours, not the machine's, mine." He looked at me with a mixture of heartbreak and terrifying resolve. "You think a signature makes you free? You think that email means anything? They own you now, Justine. From the moment you clicked that button, you became a node in their network. A data point." He took a step forward, raising the grounding rod again. "But I can still save you. We can scrub the data. We can go completely dark. But first, we have to purge the contamination." He wasn't talking about the phone anymore. He was looking at me. "Dad, stop," I said, backing up until my legs hit the workbench. "You are scaring me. This isn't protection. This is a prison. It is a sanctuary," he yelled, slamming the rod against a metal shelf. Tools clattered to the floor. "And I won't let you infect it. You brought the signal in here. You used their network right in front of me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a weapon. It was a lighter. He flicked it open, the small flame dancing in the gloom. He looked at the workbench next to me. Sitting there, in an open container, was a gallon of kerosene for the lanterns. "We have to burn it out, Justine," he said, his voice eerily calm again. "The signal, the data, the corruption. Fire is the only thing that truly cleans." "Dad, no!" I screamed. "The whole garage is full of sawdust and old wood. You will kill us both. Better to burn as humans than live as machines," he whispered. He tossed the lighter. It tumbled through the air in slow motion, a tiny arc of fire. I lunged, desperate to catch it, to bat it away, to do anything. But I was too far. The lighter landed in the pool of spilled kerosene on the workbench. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted instantly, climbing the pegboard, consuming the vintage manuals, the wooden handles of the tools, the very history Emmett had tried so hard to preserve. The heat was intense, pushing me back. "Dad!" I screamed, coughing as the smoke thickened. "Open the door! We have to get out!" Emmett didn't move. He stood in front of the door, staring into the flames. He looked peaceful. Like he was finally watching the world make sense. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured, Pure energy. No code, no algorithms, just heat. I looked around frantically. The fire was spreading fast, licking at the ceiling joists. The garage was a tinderbox. If I didn't get out in 30 seconds, I would suffocate or burn. I saw the heavy cast iron vise on the corner of the workbench. It wasn't bolted down. Emmett had been restoring it. I grabbed it. It was heavy, maybe 20 pounds of solid iron. "Dad, move!" I yelled, hefting the vise. He turned to look at me, his eyes reflecting the inferno. "You can't leave, Justine. The protocol isn't finished." "To hell with your protocol," I screamed. I didn't throw the vise at him. I couldn't do that. I threw it at the only weak point in the garage, the window. The heavy iron smashed through the glass and the wooden muntins, shattering the pane and clearing the frame in one violent crash. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the fire, making it roar even louder. "No!" Emmett yelled, realizing what I was doing. "Don't you dare!" I didn't hesitate. I vaulted onto the workbench, shielding my face from the heat, and dove through the broken window. I landed hard on the gravel outside, rolling to absorb the impact. Glass shards bit into my arms and legs, but I was out. I was breathing cool, night air. I scrambled to my feet and looked back. The garage was fully engulfed now. Flames were licking out of the window I had just escaped from, and Emmett was still inside. "Dad!" I screamed, running toward the door. "Dad, get out!" I grabbed the handle. It was hot, searing hot. I yanked on it, but the deadbolt was still engaged. He had locked himself in. "Dad, open the door!" I pounded on the metal until my fists bruised. I heard coughing from inside. Then a voice, faint but clear. "The data is purged, Justine. It is all gone." "Dad, please!" I sobbed, kicking the door. "Just open it." Suddenly, I felt hands pulling me back. "Justine, get back!" It was Mr. Wagner. He had run over from his yard, still in his robe. Behind him, I saw flashing lights. Blue and red. The fire department. The police. "He is in there!" I screamed, fighting Mr. Wagner's grip. "He locked the door. He is going to die. The roof is going to collapse!" Mr. Wagner yelled, dragging me away. "Look at the structure!" I looked up. The roof of the garage was sagging. The old timber beams were groaning under the heat. "No," I wailed. "Dad!" And then the garage door opened. Not because Emmett unlocked it, but because the fire had melted the mechanism. Emmett stumbled out. He was on his hands and knees, coughing violently, his clothes smoking. He dragged himself onto the grass, collapsing just as the roof of the garage caved in with a thunderous crash, sending a plume of sparks and debris high into the night sky. I broke free from Mr. Wagner and ran to him. "Dad!" He was burned, badly. His arms, his face, but he was alive. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and terrified. "Justine!" He wheezed, grabbing my hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Did you see it?" "See what, Dad?" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "The fire?" "No," he whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the ruins of his workshop. "The smoke." It formed a pattern, a QR code. They were watching us the whole time, even in the fire. I stared at him. The ambulance crew was running toward us. The house was saved, but the garage, his sanctuary, his church of the analog, was gone. And he was still trapped in the one place I couldn't rescue him from. His own mind. The ambulance ride was a blur of red lights and the smell of burnt hair. Emmett was strapped to a gurney, his hands wrapped in sterile gauze, mumbling about signal density and thermal mapping. I sat in the corner, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, watching the paramedics work on him. They cut away his flannel shirt, exposing the angry red burns on his chest. "Justine?" Emmett whispered, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Did you secure the perimeter?" I looked at the paramedic, a young woman with kind eyes who was checking his vitals. She gave me a sympathetic look. "He is in shock, honey. Just keep him calm." "Yeah, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "The perimeter is secure. No signals got out." He nodded, closing his eyes. "Good. Good girl. We held the line." We arrived at the hospital, and they wheeled him into the burn unit. I was left standing in the waiting room, still covered in soot and smelling like diesel fuel. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from the university. "Status update. Enrollment confirmed. Orientation packet sent." I stared at the screen. I had won. I was in. But the cost was sitting in a sterile room down the hall, convinced he had just fought a war against invisible machines. Suddenly, the double doors swung open. My mom, Abby, rushed in. She looked frantic, her hair wild, wearing a coat over her pajamas. She saw me and practically collapsed into a hug. "Justine!" She sobbed into my shoulder. "Oh my God, are you hurt? Mr. Wagner said the whole garage went up." "I am okay, Mom," I said, pulling back to look at her. "I got out through the window. But Dad, he locked himself in. He tried to burn the data out." Abby's face went pale. She looked toward the hallway where they had taken him. "He did what?" "He thought the fire would purify the signal," I whispered. "Mom, he is. He is worse than we thought." He saw patterns in the smoke. He thinks the fire was watching him. Abby sank into a plastic chair, putting her head in her hands. I knew it was bad, Justine. But I didn't know it was this. She took a deep breath and looked up at me. The doctors say he has second-degree burns on 30% of his body, but they are more worried about his mental state. They are calling in a psych eval. Good, I said, leaning against the wall. Maybe they can finally fix him. It is not that simple, Abby said quietly. If they commit him, Justine, if they put him in a facility, he will never survive. He thinks hospitals are harvesting centers. He thinks doctors are agents of the algorithm. It will kill him. I looked at her, stunned. Mom, he almost killed us. He set the garage on fire with me inside. We can't just take him home and pretend this didn't happen. We aren't taking him home, she said, her voice hardening, because we don't have a home anymore. The fire marshal condemned the house. The structural damage to the garage compromised the foundation. We can't go back. My stomach dropped. What? So we are homeless? We are staying at Luca's for tonight, she said. His parents offered. But after that, I don't know. The doors opened again. A doctor walked out looking grim. Family of Emmett Frederick? That is us, Abby said, standing up. He is stable, the doctor said. But he is refusing treatment. He claims the IV drip contains nanotrackers. We had to sedate him. But before he went under, he said something strange. He looked at me. He said, "Tell Justine the test isn't over. The relay board is still live." I felt a chill run down my spine. The relay board? He said something about a failsafe, the doctor continued. Something he built into the house's wiring. He said if the primary generator failed, the secondary protocol would initiate. Secondary protocol? I whispered. Mom, what is he talking about? Abby looked terrified. He spent months working on the basement wiring. He said he was building a dead man's switch. I thought he was just talking. Doctor, I said, grabbing his arm. My dad is an electrical genius. If he says there is a fail-safe, there is a fail-safe. What kind of fail-safe? The doctor looked confused. He mentioned a ground loop feedback. He said it would trigger if the main power was cut for more than an hour. I looked at the clock on the wall. It had been 45 minutes since Emmett cut the transformer. Oh my God, I breathed. He wired the house to short itself out. If the grid goes down, he built a surge into the ground line. It is going to fry everything plugged into the block. Justine, stop, Abby said. The power is already out. The transformer blew. No, I said, backing away. The transformer blew the incoming power, but the ground line is still connected. If he wired a capacitor bank into the basement, when that timer hits 0, it is going to dump a massive charge back into the earth. It won't just hit our house. It will hit the whole neighborhood. Mr. Wagner's smart home system, Luca's house, everything connected to that ground loop. We have to call the power company, Abby yelled. There is no time, I shouted, already running for the exit. I have 15 minutes to get back there and pull the disconnect. Justine, wait! Abby screamed. I didn't wait. I burst out of the hospital doors and into the cool night air. I didn't have a car. My bike was in the ruins of the garage. I saw a taxi idling at the curb. I jumped in. Where to? The driver asked, looking at my soot-covered face. Willow Creek Drive, I panted. And step on it, or the whole street is going to explode. The ride felt like an eternity. I watched the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. 10 minutes. 8 minutes. We pulled onto my street. It was dark. Pitch black. The only light came from the flashing lights of the fire truck still parked in front of my house. The fire was out, but the garage was a smoking crater. I threw a wad of cash at the driver and scrambled out. I ducked under the police tape before an officer could stop me. Hey, you can't be here, a cop yelled. My dad rigged the basement, I screamed back, sprinting toward the side door of the house. I have to kill the main breaker. I kicked the door open. It was unlocked. The house was silent and dark. I fumbled for my phone flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. I ran to the basement door and threw it open. The smell of ozone was stronger down here. I could hear a low humming sound. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It was coming from the far wall, a bank of massive homemade capacitors Emmett had wired together. A timer on the wall was counting down. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay, I whispered, my hands shaking. Think like an engineer. Think like Dad. The capacitors were charged. If I just cut the wire, the arc would kill me. I had to discharge them safely, or I had to disconnect the ground link. I scanned the wall. The main ground wire, a thick braided copper cable, ran from the capacitor bank into the concrete floor. That was it. That was the injection point. I needed insulated cutters, but all the tools were in the garage. Burnt. I looked around frantically. My eyes landed on a pair of heavy rubber gardening gloves sitting on a shelf, and next to them, a rusty, dull hacksaw. It wasn't insulated. If I touched the blade while cutting, I was dead. 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Use the gloves, I told myself. Don't touch the metal. Just cut the copper. I pulled the gloves on. They were too big, clumsy. I grabbed the hacksaw. I ran to the cable. The hum was getting louder. The capacitors were ready to dump their load. I positioned the saw blade over the thick copper braid. Justine! I froze. A voice from the top of the stairs. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't a cop. It was Luca. He was standing there, holding a flashlight. What are you doing? The cops are coming in. Stay back, Luca, I yelled. Dad rigged the ground. If I don't cut this, it is going to surge the whole block. Get out. I am not leaving you, he shouted, running down the stairs. Luca, stop! I screamed. He reached the bottom of the stairs just as I started sawing. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The copper was tough. The saw was dull. 1 minute remaining. It is not cutting fast enough, I cried, sweat stinging my eyes. Luca looked at the setup. He looked at the timer. He understood instantly. He was a tech kid. He knew what capacitors did. Justine, move, he said, grabbing a heavy wooden shovel from the corner. What? The connection point, he yelled. It is bolted to the floor. We don't have to cut the wire. We just have to break the bolt. He was right. The cable was clamped to a grounding rod embedded in the concrete. The bolt was old and rusted. Do it, I screamed, stepping back. Luca swung the shovel like a baseball bat. Wham! The wood splintered. The bolt held. 30 seconds remaining. Again, I yelled. Hit it harder! Luca grunted and swung again, with everything he had. Crack. The shovel handle snapped in half, but the impact did it. The rusted bolt sheared off. The cable whipped away from the floor clamp with a violent snap, recoiling like a snake. 10 seconds. The timer hit 0. Click. The capacitors discharged. But instead of dumping the charge into the ground and into the neighborhood grid, the current had nowhere to go. It hit the open air at the end of the cable. Bang! A massive blue arc of lightning exploded from the cable tip, striking the concrete wall. The sound was deafening. The flash blinded us both. I felt a shockwave knock me off my feet. I hit the floor hard, my ears ringing. Silence. The hum was gone. The timer was dark. I lay there for a second, gasping for air. Luca? I am good, his voice came from the darkness. I think. My hair feels like it is standing up. I laughed. A hysterical sobbing laugh. We did it. We broke the loop. Suddenly, flashlight beams cut down the stairs. Police! Hands up! I raised my hands, still wearing the giant rubber gardening gloves. Don't shoot! I yelled. We just saved the neighborhood. The cops swarmed us, pulling us to our feet. They dragged us up the stairs and out onto the lawn. The fire chief was there, talking to Mr. Wagner. They both looked at us as we were hauled out. What happened down there? The chief asked. We heard an explosion. My dad, I said, catching my breath. He tried to take the grid down with him. We disconnected it. Mr. Wagner looked at me with wide eyes. You mean the surge? The feedback loop? It is gone, I said. The capacitors are drained. It is over. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hand still shaking. It wasn't a text. It was a voicemail, from an unknown number. I pressed play. Justine, a voice whispered. It was distorted, static-filled. But I knew it. It was Emmett. If you are hearing this, the surge failed, which means you stopped it. You used the manual override. I knew you had the hands for it. The test is complete. You passed. The message ended. I stared at the phone. He had recorded it before the fire, before the ambulance. He knew I would come back. He knew I would figure it out. He hadn't built a bomb to destroy the neighborhood. He had built a final exam. And I had just aced it. I played the voicemail again. And again. Each time Emmett's distorted, static-filled voice whispered, "You passed," it felt less like a validation and more like a final, twisted psychological anchor. He hadn't just tried to burn my future. He had orchestrated a high-voltage aptitude test that nearly killed me, my boyfriend, and the entire block. It was the ultimate narcissism of a man who believed he was the only one awake in a sleeping world. Luca was sitting on the curb next to me, wrapped in a shock blanket the paramedics had given him. He was shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline withdrawal. He knew? Luca asked, staring at the pavement. He rigged a capacitor bank to blow just to see if you could stop it? It wasn't about blowing it up, Luca, I said, my voice hollow. It was about how I stopped it. He wanted to see if I would use the digital solution, hacking the timer, or the analog solution. The hammer, the physical brake, and you used the shovel, Luca whispered. You went analog. Yeah, I said, looking at my blistered hands. I did exactly what he wanted. The police finished their sweep of the basement. The fire marshal came over, looking grave. Your father's little science project down there is being classified as a rudimentary EMP device, he said, scribbling on a clipboard. If that charge had grounded, it would have fried the transformers for 3 streets. We are talking millions in damages. He is looking at federal charges now. Reckless endangerment, attempted arson, domestic terrorism. He is in the burn unit, I said quietly. He is already serving his sentence. The marshal looked at me, then at the house. You can't go back in there. The structural integrity is gone. The foundation is cracked from the heat and the discharge. It is a teardown. A teardown. My childhood home, the workshop, the sanctuary, all of it was just a pile of bricks waiting for a bulldozer. Come on, Luca said, standing up and offering me a hand. My mom is waiting. You need a shower and food. Real food, not MREs. We walked to his house in silence. It felt strange to walk through the neighborhood I had just saved. The streetlights were humming again. Mr. Wagner's smart sprinklers clicked on, a rhythmic ch-ch-ch that sounded obscenely normal after the chaos. At Luca's house, his mom, Mrs. Sato, was waiting with towels and hot tea. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me, hard, and pointed me toward the guest bathroom. I stood in the shower for 45 minutes, scrubbing the soot and the smell of ozone from my skin. The water turned gray at my feet. I watched it swirl down the drain, thinking about the patterns Emmett saw in the smoke. Was I spiraling too? Was I looking for meaning in the mess he left behind? When I came out, wrapped in one of Luca's oversized hoodies, my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. It was plugged into a charger, a fast charger, a digital lifeline. One new voicemail, not from Emmett, from the university. Hi Justine, this is Dean Reynolds. We received your signed waiver. Welcome to the program. We also saw the news report about the incident at your home. We understand if you need to defer your start date, please call us. I stared at the phone. Defer? After everything? No, I whispered to the empty room. I am not stopping. I walked into the living room. Luca was on his laptop typing furiously. What are you doing? I asked, sitting on the arm of the sofa. I am trying to track the signal from your dad's dead man switch, he said without looking up. The timer. It wasn't just a timer, Justine. It was broadcasting. I froze. Broadcasting what? Data, Luca said, turning the screen toward me. It showed a frequency spectrum analyzer. A jagged line spiked right at the moment the timer hit 0. When the capacitors discharged, they sent a pulse. A burst transmission. It was aimed at a specific IP address. He said he was going dark, I said, my mind racing. Why would he send data? Because he wasn't trying to destroy the grid, Luca said, his eyes wide. He was trying to upload something. The surge was the carrier wave. He used the house's wiring as an antenna. Upload what? I asked, leaning closer. His manifesto? No, Luca said, clicking a file. This. He opened a folder that had been intercepted by his packet sniffer. It was a single, massive PDF file. Project Alethea Schematics Final.pdf. Alethea, I whispered. Truth. It is blueprints, Luca said, scrolling through the document. Hundreds of pages. Diagrams for a new type of power grid. Decentralized, analog-digital hybrid. It is genius, Justine. He designed a system that can't be hacked because the switching mechanisms are physical, but it can still be monitored remotely. I looked at the complex drawings. They were beautiful. Elegant. They were the work of a sane man trapped in a paranoid mind. He wasn't trying to stop the future, I realized. He was trying to build a better one, and he couldn't tell anyone because he thought they would steal it. He sent it to the university, Luca said, pointing to the destination IP, to the engineering department server, specifically to the dean's private inbox. My jaw dropped. He sent his life's work to the people he hates? Look at the timestamp, Luca said. It sent exactly when you cut the wire. The discharge provided the power boost needed to punch through the jammer interference one last time. He wanted me to deliver it, I whispered. The test, the pass. It wasn't about saving the house. It was about powering the transmission. If I hadn't cut the wire, the surge would have ground it out and the data would have been lost. By breaking the connection, I forced the energy up. I sat back, stunned. Emmett had played me like a fiddle. He knew I would choose the analog solution. He knew I would use the physical break, and he used my own defiance to launch his legacy. So what now? Luca asked. Do we delete it? Do we let the dean see it? We don't do anything, I said, standing up. He sent it. It is done. But if they see this, Luca said, they will know he is not just a crazy arsonist. They will see he is a visionary. It might help his legal case. It might keep him out of prison. Or, I said, walking to the window and looking out at the dark silhouette of my ruined house, it might prove he is too dangerous to ever be let out. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. They are moving him. He is stable enough for transport. They are taking him to the state psychiatric facility in the morning. He is asking for you, Justine. He says he needs to give you the key. The key? I said aloud. I already have the key to the lockbox. Maybe not a physical key, Luca said quietly. I looked at the text. He wants to see me. Are you going? I thought about the fire. I thought about the blowtorch. I thought about the letter turning to ash. Yeah, I said, grabbing my jacket. I am going. I need to look him in the eye when I tell him I am taking the scholarship. I will drive you, Luca said, closing his laptop. We drove to the hospital in silence. The parking lot was empty. The lights of the burn unit were dim. I walked into his room. Emmett was bandaged from head to waist. His face was covered in a clear, soothing gel. He looked small, fragile, not like the titan who had terrified me for 18 years. He opened his eyes when I walked in. They were clear. The paranoia was gone, replaced by a heavy, drugged exhaustion. Justine, he croaked. I am here, Dad, I said, standing at the foot of the bed. I didn't get closer. Did it send? He asked. Yes, I said. Luca tracked it. The dean has the schematics. He let out a long, ragged sigh. Good. Good. They will understand now. They will see why I had to burn the old system down. Dad, I said, my voice steady. You burned our house down. You almost killed me. Necessary sacrifices, he murmured, closing his eyes. Progress requires heat. No, I said, stepping closer. It doesn't. You are wrong. You think you are a martyr, but you are just a man who was afraid of being obsolete. He opened his eyes, a flash of the old fire returning. Obsolete? I just revolutionized the grid from a basement, and you are going to prison for it, I shouted. You are going to a cell where you won't be allowed to touch a screwdriver for the rest of your life. Was it worth it? He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. You tell me, Justine. You are the engineer now. Was the data worth the hardware? I stared at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But then I remembered the blueprints, the elegance, the brilliance. The hardware is replaceable, I said, my voice cold. The data is permanent. He smiled, a cracked, painful smile. That is my girl. That is a Frederick. He reached out his bandaged hand. The key, he whispered. Take it. What key? I asked. The encryption key? He said. For the files. The dean can't open them without it. It is in my head. I need to give it to you before the meds wipe it. Dad, I said, realizing what he was doing. He was making me the gatekeeper. Again. Tell me, I said, pulling out my phone and hitting record. He rattled off a string of numbers, coordinates, frequencies. It wasn't a password. It was a calibration sequence for a specific type of relay. Got it? He asked, his voice fading. I got it, I said. Don't give it to them, he whispered, his eyes closing. Not until they admit I was right. Make them say it. Make them say the machine needs the man. The monitor beeped steadily. He was asleep. I walked out of the room. Luca was waiting in the hall. Did he give it to you? Luca asked. Yeah, I said, holding up my phone. I have the key. What are you going to do with it? I looked at the phone. I looked at the send button on the recording. I could send it to the dean. I could validate Emmett's genius. I could save his legacy. Or I could delete it. I could let the files remain a locked mystery forever. I could let him be just a crazy man who burned down a garage. I thought about the blowtorch. I thought about the ash. I pressed the button. But I didn't hit send. I hit delete. Justine? Luca asked, seeing my face. He wanted to be right, I said, walking toward the exit. He wanted to prove the machine needs the man. Well, he was wrong. I tossed the phone into my bag. The machine doesn't need him, I said, pushing open the doors to the parking lot. And neither do I. I walked out of the hospital into the cool pre-dawn air, leaving Emmett and his encrypted genius behind in a sterile room he believed was a harvesting center. The silence in the parking lot was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that comes after a bomb goes off, the ringing in your ears that tells you are still alive. Luca was waiting by his mom's sedan, the engine idling. He saw me toss my phone into my bag and knew exactly what I had done. You deleted it, he said, not asking a question. You deleted the key. He wanted to be a martyr, I said, opening the passenger door. He wanted the world to beg him for the answer. I am not playing his game anymore. Justine, those blueprints could have changed everything, Luca said, looking at me with wide eyes. A decentralized grid? An unhackable system? That is worth billions. It could have saved his, well, maybe not his freedom, but his legacy. His legacy is ash, I said, slamming the door. Drive. We drove back to Luca's house in silence. The sun was starting to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. I watched the power lines whiz by, the very infrastructure Emmett had tried to revolutionize and destroy in the same breath. They looked fragile now. Temporary. When we pulled into Luca's driveway, Mrs. Sato was waiting on the porch. She looked worried. Your mom called, she said as I got out of the car. The police finished their preliminary report. They found something else in the basement. My stomach dropped. What? Another bomb? No, Mrs. Sato said, handing me a sealed evidence bag. This was in a fireproof safe under the floorboards. The fire marshal said it wasn't connected to the surge device. It was personal. I took the bag. Inside was a single leather-bound notebook. It was charred around the edges, smelling of smoke and ozone. It is his journal, I whispered. Open it, Luca said gently. I sat on the porch steps and cracked the stiff leather cover. The pages were filled with Emmett's tight, frantic handwriting, diagrams of circuits, rants about AI, calculations for the jammer. But then I turned to the last entry. Dated yesterday. The day of the fire. Subject, Justine. Status, ready. The test is scheduled for tonight. I know she will try to stop it. I know she will use the manual override. She is a Frederick. She understands resistance. If she succeeds, she proves the hypothesis. The human element is the ultimate fail-safe. No algorithm can predict courage. No machine can calculate love. I have to push her. I have to break her connection to the digital noise so she can hear her own frequency. If I have to become the villain to make her the hero, so be it. The blueprints are already sent. The key is in her memory. She doesn't know it yet, but she is the architect now. God forgive me for the fire. But steel is forged in flame. I stared at the words. The letters swam before my eyes. He knew, I whispered, tears finally spilling over. He knew I would delete the key. He knew I would reject him. Read the last line, Luca said, pointing to a scrawl at the bottom of the page. P.S. The encryption key isn't a random sequence. It is the date she fixed her first circuit. Her 10th birthday. She will remember. I froze. My 10th birthday. Emmett had bought me a snap circuit kit. We spent the whole day building a radio. When we finally got it to work, when static turned into music, he had lifted me up on his shoulders and told me I was a wizard. October 14, 2016. I looked at Luca. 10/14/2016. That is the key? Luca asked. That is the key, I said. He didn't give me a random string of numbers in the hospital. He gave me a decoy. He knew I would delete it out of spite. He hid the real key in a memory he knew I couldn't erase. I pulled my phone out of my bag. I opened the email app. The dean's contact info was still there. I could send it. I could type in the date and unlock the files. I could show the world that Emmett Frederick wasn't just a paranoid arsonist, but a visionary who loved his daughter enough to destroy himself to prove her worth. Or I could let it stay buried. I looked at the sunrise. I looked at the power lines. I looked at my blistered hands, the hands that had thrown the copper wire, the hands that had broken the connection, the hands that had signed the waiver. He wanted me to be the architect, I said, standing up. He wanted me to choose. So what do you choose? Luca asked. I opened a new email to Dean Reynolds. Subject, Emmett Frederick's research, decryption key. I typed the numbers, 10142016. Then I added a message, Dean Reynolds. Attached is the key to the files sent from my IP address last night. My father, Emmett Frederick, designed this system. It is a decentralized analog-digital hybrid grid. It is brilliant. It is dangerous. And it works. He is currently in state custody. I am currently your newest student. I am sending this because the machine needs the man. But the man needs to know when to let go. Use the designs. But know this. The failsafe isn't in the wiring. It is in the people who maintain it. See you at orientation. Justine Frederick. I hit send. Sent. The weight lifted off my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. I didn't forgive him for the blowtorch or the terror, but it was understanding. I accepted the burden of his genius without accepting the burden of his madness. You sent it, Luca said, smiling. Yeah, I said, closing the phone. I sent it. So what now? Now? I said, looking at the charred journal in my lap. Now I go to college. I learn everything they have to teach me about AI and automation. And then I come back. Come back? Luca asked. To what? The house is gone. To the garage, I said, looking toward the horizon where smoke was still rising from the ruins of my home. I am going to rebuild it, but this time it won't be a bunker. It will be a lab. I turned to Luca, and I am going to need a partner who knows how to code. Luca grinned. I think I can clear my schedule. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the world. The sun was fully up now, bathing the neighborhood in golden light. The power hummed in the lines above my head. The digital signals invisible in the air were carrying my email to a server somewhere, changing my future again. Emmett was wrong about a lot of things. He was wrong about the fear, he was wrong about the fire, but he was right about one thing. Progress requires heat, and I was finally warm.